Hello, this is Dr. Mears. Today we are going to be learning about ogives and percentiles. First definition of ogive, a cumulative frequency curve. It helps us to determine any percentile. What is a percentile? A percentile is percent of data below another data point. We're going to get to that, and I'm going to write a nice sentence so that it will help you understand what that actually means. To calculate, there is a little bit of a formula here. However, if you understand what a percentile is, you don't really necessarily need to memorize a formula. But if you're a person that likes to use one, I have included one and I will show you how to use it. And so the percentile is going to equal P times the quantity n plus 1 all over 100. We're going to do two things here. First, I'm going to show you how to make a cumulative frequency table, and then I'm going to help you interpret it and write some nice sentences from the table. Then we're going to learn how to read a ogive graph, and again, how to write some nice sentences to interpret the ogive graph. So here we go. Let's make a cumulative frequency table. So in this situation, we have the number of visits, that should have an S on it, N, that's our variable, to Gillette Castle, it is a castle in Connecticut, it's pretty neat if you want to check it out, was noted on 200 separate days of the year. So this is what they did. Here we have our number of visitors. So on any given day, let's say day 1, they went and they counted how many visitors there were. And they noticed there was 36 visitors. Well, that's between 0 and 50. The next day, they recorded how many visitors. The following day, they recorded how many visitors. And they did that on 200 days of the year, for 200 days. So first, before we get to the cumulative frequency part, let's just look to see, let's define what our frequency represents. It's going to make this much easier. So our frequency here, there's 200 days. So here, this is the number of days. So there were 16 days where there was between 0 and 50 visitors. So number of days. Please write this down. It is really easier to understand what's happening with cumulative frequency and the ogive if we write down number of days instead of the word frequency, and that's how I'm going to be referring to it. So there were 38 days that had between 0 to 5, that had between 50 and 100 visitors. There were 50 days that had between 100 and 150 total visitors. There were only 3 days that had between 350 to 400 visitors. So that's how we read this. All right, let's get to cumulative frequency. Cumulative frequency is going to accumulate the number of days throughout our entire table. So what do I mean? Okay, let's start with the frequency of 16. That's where we start. So there's 16 days that we had visitors, 0 to 50 visitors come in. What we have to do now is we have to add in the 38. So we're going to be doing 16 plus 38. And so we're going to accumulate that next. When we accumulate that next one, we get 54. So now what we're looking at is between 0 and 100 days, there were 54 days that had between 0 and 100 visitors come in. Now we're going to accumulate the next one. So we're going to be doing 54 plus 50. And we're going to come out to be 104. So there are 104 days that we had between 0 and 150 visitors. So we're making our group bigger. So we're looking at the number of visitors that we're making it bigger. All right, let's accumulate the next one. So we're going to do 104 plus 36, and we're going to get to 140. So there are 140 days where we saw between 0 and 200 visitors. Let's accumulate the next, 140 plus 32. There was 172 days where there was between 0 and 250 visitors. Again, we're making the group bigger. We're accumulating the number of visitors over time here. Now let's add. So we wasn't putting the little arrows in. So now we're going to take 172 and add 19. 172 plus 19 is 191. So there are 191 days that we saw between 0 and 300. Let's again accumulate the next one. 191 plus 6, we get to 197. 197 days between 0 and 350. And then let's add the last one in. 197 plus 3, and that's 200. So there were 200 days that we saw between 0 and 400 visitors. And so this total should match with our total from the problem here. So knowing this, let's write out a couple sentences. Okay, let's first write a sentence where we just looked at the frequency. I'm going to write down that first sentence that I actually said to you. There were 16 days that had 16 days between 0 and 50 people visit. Okay. The next sentence we're going to write is the maximum here. The 3. There were only 3 days that had between 350 and 400 visitors. The next one that I'm going to write down is going to be our modal class. A lot of people are still having trouble. And so for modal class, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the highest frequency. This is the highest frequency. This is the modal class. That's where we see the most. The most days is 50. And so here is the modal class. So most days, and I'm going to write down modal class, had between 100 to 150 visitors. And the last one, I'm going to address this total here. If we accumulated this whole entire total, so, or actually let's do one of the sentences. Let's look right here. Let's look at this one, 140. What is this cumulative frequency of 140? What does that represent? So that represents there were 140 days. There were 140 days that had between 0, whoops, let's go up here, 140 days that had between 0 and 200 visitors. Ooh, that kind of feels like a middle point, huh? Between 0 and 200 visitors. And then we can see that, let me leave that up for you, there were 140 days that had between 0 and 200 visitors. And here we can see that all of the days, we had between 0 and 400 people show up. That's it. Or we can even say all of the days we had less than 400 people show up. And I do want to write that sentence with our sentences, so I'm just going to write it at the top of the paper because it is important. So all 200 days, there were less than 400 visitors. And that's important because that is the total, and it does stop at 400, so 200 days, there were less than 400 visitors. Okay. You can pause it, ask me questions if needed. I'm going to move on to how to read the graph. So this is an ogive. Some people might know it as an S-curve. I am going to, let's see, make sure this is number of visitors. Over here says frequency, but again, let's put a number of days. Always write in what your frequency actually represents. It's going to help you do the problem easier. Let's look at the scale here. It goes, this is 30, 60, 90, 120. I'm not sure it's coming up. It is a little bit fuzzy on the paper, which means it's going to be fuzzy for you at home. I apologize, but this does start off with 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180. So it does go by 30s. And here we have 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, so on and so forth. So what we're going to do is we're going to be finding percentiles, and then we're going to interpret what they mean using a sentence. And we're going to find there's about 5 of these percentiles, so bear with me here. And I have a nice title, Visitors to Gillette Castle. So let's find the 50th percentile. When we find the 50th percentile, we're actually finding the median, everybody. This is the median. You got it. You will have recognized this from our work with box plots. You can picture a box plot in your head and you know it's that middle line. Well, we're going to find the middle of this curve. Yay. Let's first use our formula. Our formula was P times the quantity n plus 1 over 100. So it's going to be P, which is 50. This is P, times what our n is. N is going to be the total number of days. So our total number, n is the total number. Our total number was 200. We just wrote a sentence about it. Plus 1 over 100. And you can put that in your calculator as is. You can put 50 times 200 plus 1 and divided by 100, and it's going to come out to 100.5. And so this represents, since this is days, this represents days, number of days. And so what we do to find out how many visitors, the median number of visitors, what we do is we have to read this graph. We have to go to the graph. So since this is the days, what we do is we go to the y-axis, the number of days. And we scroll up to about 100.5, which is very close to 100 here. And so we make that little mark. And we're going to use our trusty old ruler. And we're going to come all the way over until we touch that curve. Once you touch that curve, you're right here, you're going to drop down to see how many visitors. And yes, I did a nice little dotted line for you. And we come out right here, and it's right next to 150. So the exact answer we're not going to get because we don't have a perfect scale. So let's estimate, let's say about 140. That's what I feel that it was, about 140. Again, this is an estimation because we don't have the exact data in front of us. If we did, we could do a box plot and find out exactly what it was. But we don't. We have a nice S-curve. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's write a sentence. That means, using the percentile, 50% of the days, actually, let's write it all out. Let's write it nicely. 50% of the days had less than 140 visitors. And this is what I mean by percentile. It's at that mark. This is what we had, that's what's less than, what we had less than that mark. We can also write 50th percentile is 140 visitors. You can write that sentence. However, this sentence really gets to the heart of what is a percentile. All right, let's find the 25th percentile. So 25th percentile, guess what that is? You got it, quartile 1, or otherwise known as lower quartile. So again, in a box plot, you could visibly see where that quartile 1 is. Here, we have to find on our S-curve where we're going to be going up our S-curve. We're going to have to stop at a quarter of the way. Pretty cool, huh? So let's do our formula. 25, 200 plus 1, all over 100. And now I'm going to show you something pretty cool about this formula. If we divided 25 by 100, if we divided this, guess what you get? You get 1/4, and 1/4 is a quarter. And what we want to do is we want to take a quarter of our total number of days. That's what we're doing here. We're adding 1 because we need to get shifted over to +1, where we want to move up that little bit. So We had to add that 1 because we don't start necessarily at 0. We start at that 1 day. So you can, if you would like to remember it like this, that's absolutely fine. But if you want to find a quarter of your data, that's what you're really doing. Here, guess what? What is 50 divided by 100? Well, 50 divided by 100 is 1/2. We wanted 1/2 of our data plus 1. So you don't have to memorize the formula, but if you are a formula person, that is absolutely fine. All right, this is going to be in our calculator, 50.25. Remember, this is the number of days that we're going to have to go to. So we're going to 50.25, so let's go. Here's the number of days, so this is where you're starting. We're going to go to about 50, and yes, I did mark it for you. It is right here, because I knew this would come out a little bit blurry. So you go to 50, which is about here. You draw a line until you hit that curve. You hit that curve, so what are we going to do? You got it. We're going to drop down here. Very close to 90. Let's call it 95. So this is 90 right here, and this is 120. So let's call it about 95. Again, it's an estimate. You're not going to be perfect. So about 95 visitors. I always attach my label on. Let's write our sentence, and I'm just going to write it like this, 25% to save time of the days had less than 95 visitors. And that's what it means to be a percentile. It's how 25% of the data. And if we look here on our graph, doesn't that look like it's about 25% of the way? 25%. Doesn't this up here, this whole from 0 all the way up here, doesn't it look like 50%? Guess which one we're going to do next? You got it, 75%. So let's go. Okay. Find the 75th percentile. Again, quartile 3. This is how it's matching up with our work on box plots. So this is the upper quartile. So we have to find the 75th% of the data. So we can use our formula. And guess what? 75 divided by 100, guess what that was? That's 3/4, which if you divide it out, it's 0.75. So we're doing the same things. We're just either cutting it in half, cutting it in a quarter, cutting it in 3/4, or 75%. Okay, this is going to be equaling 150.75. And remember, we're going to be looking the days up, okay? So let's go back to our graph. And yes, I did do it for you. Here would be about that 150.75. So you go to the number of days. We draw our line, hit our S curve, go all the way down, which that's not really that good, but you get the dotted line here. So we go all the way down. And we're going to come really close to 210 here. So it does look like, I'm going to call it, this is 210, and it looks really close again. So I'm going to call it 215. Again, it's an estimate. It's not perfect. So we're going to say about 215 visitors. You can write your sentence, 75% of the days had less than 215 visitors. And yes, I expect the sentence. It lets me know that you know how to do it. All right, let's find two other ones. First, let's find the 100th percentile, because I do want to come back to the total to show you, wow, seeing how all of this works together. So using our formula, look what happens. 100 divided by 100, right? It cancels out because it's 100% of 100, 100%. So this comes out to be 201. Remember, we're looking up days, so that we had to go over that one day so that we can find the 100% of the data below it. That's why it's 201, because we want to find 100% of the data below 201. And what number is below 201? That's right, 200. So it's not at 201, it's below it. So that's why we have to add this +1 here. That's the reason for the +1. Okay, so let's go to 201. So 201 is about up here, very close to 200. So that's at the tippity top of the S curve. So you got it. It's going to come and it's going to hit right there. We're going to drop all the way down here. And it's going to look really good because this is 490 and this is a little bit further away than we were before. So we're going to call it 400. We called this 95. We called this 140 and we called this 215 just to write the numbers in there for you. So 400. This makes complete sense because at 200, we found it was less than 400 visitors. This is all matching up. So let's write our sentence. 100% of the days had less than 400 visitors. Yay! All right, now let's find one that's out of the ordinary, one that you couldn't find on a box plot, one that you can only find here on our ogive, and that is going to be the 37th percentile. I could have given you any percentile. I could have said 72, I could say 64, I could say 19, it doesn't matter. We're going to now be able to find any percentile because we have this ogive. So let's use our formula. And again, if we divide this out, it won't be pretty, so liking a formula is good. Put that in our calculator. We're going to find 74.37. Remember, that's the number of days. Let's go to our graph. And remember, we're looking up the number of days here. So what number we're going to go to again? That's right, 74.37. So let's go. So up to 74.3. I'm thinking it's probably going to be about there. So this is 80 right here, everybody. This is 80. So I'm just going to go over. Oh, that works out nicely. Look at that. Let's go all the way down, and we land on 120. Yay, that worked out really nice. Okay, so let's put about 120 because we're estimating here. We don't have a perfect scale, and we don't have all of the data. We don't have the raw data. So about 120 visitors. Let's write our sentence. 37% of the days had less than 120 visitors. Yay! Now, why is this important? This is important because if you're manager of Gillette Castle, you need to know how many visitors are coming in. And over the course of not 10 days, but over the course of 200 days, or even over the course of 365 days. This will help you to plan out your operational hours. What time should we be open to? What time should we close? Should we have lunch? Do we see that there's more visitors when we provide a food truck? So this is very important to do, especially if you're managing a company or a hotel or Gillette Castle. So this is Dr. Mears. This was reading and making a cumulative frequency table and reading and analyzing an ogive, getting down those percentiles. Hopefully it helped. Thanks.